Look, I know what it looks like. Like, before you say anything, before you... Bring it down! What is up, Bat Family? Welcome to a brand new The Batman video update. Now, this one, I am not even trying to sound hyperbolic, exaggerative, or anything like that right now. I am very, 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 very excited to make this video. It goes back to that excitement feeling of not only speculation, but the world-building wonder of what Matt Reeves forges with his characters. Now, this, as you can tell by the title, I am indeed getting into a full, like, if you just think this is some kind of ambiguous breakdown on the unseen Arkham prisoner cameo, it goes leagues beyond that. Matt Reeves himself has gone into so much detail, more detail than what I thought, because it's funny, over the past couple of days, I've uploaded my reviews. I've done the spoiler review, which I recommend checking out yesterday, by the way. It's time-stamped. I went into some really interesting Easter egg theories. Around about the time of that video, I was getting tweets left, right, and center, people saying, "Baby, you need to check this out." Matt Reeves has basically described the unseen Arkham prisoner. Even though we have got that in the end of this movie, as you guys know by now, what you may be aware of or might be getting a little bit confused about is that there was another scene, a deleted scene that was in around the first quarter or so of the movie, in where Batman went to Arkham to see Barry Keoghan's character in an effort to help profile the Riddler, in a very, as what I've speculated before, Hannibal Lecter way. Now, obviously, I had that video to publish yesterday, but I'm glad I waited to put it out, because he's not only given a description of, okay, this will release, sometime after the movie, but right now we're promoting the movie, so but he has outright described the scene to the very dialogue. So we're going to get into that, guys, quote for quote, the inspirations, the design behind this Joker, even the backstory to an extent. And I say that because he gets into how it wasn't a chemical vat or anything like that, but more of a congenital disease. Yes, like, I know I'm rambling right now, and this is just the intro, and people are like, get to the point! But I need to. Like, we are in for an exciting video for any Joker fans. So what I'm going to do is read out the quotes, and I might interject here and there as a part of the breakdown. You know how it goes here. So I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video, subscribe for more content like this. It's been a bit bat heavy on the channel recently, but that's because we're in a bat mode right now with the film's release. So do note that we do other content here on the channel. It's just right now, I'm going head over heels into this. And yes, I know I shaved, but as they say, fear is a tool. So, starting off with what he said to IGN, you know what's the interesting thing? Is that the reason that Joker's in the movie is there was actually another scene that was earlier. The scene that was not in the movie. The scene that this is really the companion to, which is actually a really cool scene that will release at some point. It's a scene where Batman is so unnerved because the Riddler's writing to him. And he's like, well, why is this guy writing to me? And he's figuring he's got to profile this killer, and so he goes to see another killer that he's clearly had an experience with in these first 2 years. Now, we'll get into that because, yeah, it's clear that Batman had put away Barry's John Doe. And I refer to John Doe because, as what Matt Reeves will get into in what we're about to read out, is that, how Selina makes up every characteristic of Catwoman in this movie, but she doesn't have the moniker, if you will, of Catwoman. Same with that of almost like a Batman Telltale series, John Doe, who becomes the Joker, but still embodies every characteristic of the Joker in that series. Think that and translate it onto Barry's John Doe Joker in the Batman. He's basically crazy, he's smart, he's intelligent, he knows how to get in your head, as seen in that scene at the end with Riddler, and where he was like, oh, don't be sad, you did great. I already, even before reading this, by the way, as I said in my reviews, I felt like he was trying to gas up the Riddler. And Matt Reeves continues, and this killer in this story is not yet the character that we've come to know, right? So everybody's in their kind of infancy. So in the comics, these characters often declare their alter egos in response to the fact that there's a Batman out there. And so here, we have a Joker who's not yet the Joker. And I wanted to do an iteration, and I worked with Mike Marino, and the scene that you'll see in the future, you'll see that we worked on what he looked like. And he's kind of held in this kind of very suspenseful way, away from you visually. Now, even before I heard the actual detail of the scene and how it unfolds, I guessed that he would be introduced in a Hannibal Lecter way, where he's kind of strung up almost something over his mouth, so you can't see the full smile. And just to tease you, it kind of is like that, which is, man, really, really interesting. So he goes on to say that I wanted to create an iteration of him that felt distinctive and new, but went right back to the roots. So he's kind of very much out of the Conrad Veidt sort of mold. And the idea of the silent film, of the man who laughs. He's got this congenital disease. He can never stop smiling. And I was like, well, maybe there's something here where it's not something where he fell in a vat of chemicals, or it's not the Nolan thing where he has these scars and we don't know where they came from. What if this is something that he's been touched on, that he's been touched by from birth, and he has a congenital disease that refuses to let him stop smiling, and he's had this very dark reaction to it, and it's made him, he's had to spend a life of people looking at him in a certain way, and he knows how to get into your head. And he also told Variety more or less a similar thing in another way, so I do just want to say, even though it's samey, it's just more context, may as well put it out there. It's like Phantom of the Opera, Reeves says. He has a congenital disease where he can't stop smiling, and it's horrific. His face is half covered through most of the film, as to what I was saying earlier, and that's the deleted scene through most of the film, even technically in the end, I guess, through how obscure it was to see his face. While it's barely perceptible in the movie, Marino's makeup evoked Veidt's, giving Keoghan's an unceasing rictus grin. And that is, oh my god, like, I love that. I really love that. And a lot of Joker imagery and artistry, if you will, has had an influence from that of the man who laughs. I mean, look at this guy. You're seeing him on screen. If that was in live action today, it's just truly, like, there's even a graphic novel, one of my favorite Joker stories, and one of the earliest ones that I read as a fan to this material, was The Man Who Laughs, Joker story, Batman story, if you will. So here he says, like, he didn't necessarily even, like, fall in a vat of chemicals or anything like that. There are no technical scars of what happened with Heath Ledger's Joker, even though you can tell his skin and through where he's smiling, there's some gruesome, like, almost harm that maybe he's done to himself that's going on there. It's not just a congenital, I guess you could argue with what Reeves is saying here, the kind of disfigurement, pastiness of what's going on with him on screen could be a part of the congenital disease itself. Not only is it making him smile, it's also probably got this kind of rough, coarse effect that mimics that of a disfigurement that we know and love, if you will, from prior Joker iterations. Rather than just like a smooth-skinned, kind of bleached skin like that of Jared Leto's Joker, it's like more of, as I've kind of recently said, almost Fox's Gotham's approach to how kind of disfigured he was. Granted, in that version, he did reapply his face, but you kind of get what I'm going for there. This congenital disease is something that this guy's been born with. It provides not only a horrific aspect where he could have been a guy who could have been like any other guy, but through the way that disfigurement comes across is not only so unnerving, but in how he's been touched by birth, as Matt Reeves says here, and how because of that, and the way people have reacted to it his whole life, he's had himself a very dark reaction to it. In that you could almost say that of like Penguin, who almost finds it as like a derogatory comment, if anything, as Colin Farrell says, the name of that of the Penguin. He will embrace that one day. And I do believe that Barry's John Doe is already kind of at the point of where he's used to his own congenital disease, but he will embrace the clown Joker-esque imagery of his own smile, but one day. Not quite now. Which is again, Reeves' inception of this universe of not only how we saw in the first movie, there's a Batman who's still becoming, but there is a world and rogues gallery that is still becoming. And I don't know, like, whether we all have different tastes on how much we envision our own vision of Batman or not with Reeves's. Mine is firmly locked on. Like, I'm just like, dude, me and you are one of the same almost. And just hearing that he's had to spend a life of people looking at him in a certain way Man, and how he describes he knows how to get into your head. That's exactly what I meant from that dialogue that is very finely shown in that Riddler scene. But believe it or not, in the deleted scene that we're about to get into, with the actual description from Reeves, he even intelligently knows how to navigate and press Batman's buttons by getting into his head. So very quintessential Joker to me, at least, through what Matt Reeves is already building through, even though we haven't seen much. This is more just me being a big fan of these descriptions. Matt Reeves then says, so this idea of him being very kind of incisive and brilliant and being able to get into your mind and having this kind of nihilistic point of view that's sort of like from his inception, from his birth, life has been a cruel joke on him. And this is his response, and he's eventually going to declare himself as a clown, declare him as the Joker. And again, I totally get it. We all have different subjective tastes for origins for Joker, or even like a lack of origin, but alluding to an origin, whether that's something like the Killing Joke. People love that. Not everyone, but maybe they want to view him as a Red Hood gang type person who was trying to provide for his wife who died, but then he got in too deep. I really like this because it makes him a real man who could have turned into something else, but through life, as Matt Reeves said, having been this somewhat cruel joke on him, I also like how in almost a mythos-y kind of way, it's like Joker was born, almost like the chosen one in Star Wars, out of an amalgamation of the chaos that is Gotham. So from birth, even though he was an innocent baby once upon a time, he was always destined almost to be this way through how life has been that cruel joke with the way that people have looked on him, thus forming a nihilistic point of view of life and thus also reacting to that way of life he's had to endure in a very dark way. It's just something that is understandable. He's still a very intelligent character. The life he's had to almost live as a result has allowed him to maybe watch from a distance, understand how to, get things out of people in an articulate sense, that is. It's fascinating, and I can't believe, and I'm also, by the way, a fan of this, I can't believe that Matt Reeves has given us this amount of details. Granted, this isn't like a strict, straight-up origin. And not only that, this is congenital. So it's kind of really sad to imagine, but it kind of puts you more into the mind of this character and how, he's far past probably feeling sorry for himself, which is why he views life as a joke and this nihilistic sense of speaking, right? This is how he's in that mindset of Joker, granted that he hasn't given himself the moniker or declared himself as Reeves says, but he's been looking like this without, always not been able to stop smiling as a baby. That kid's just gonna grow up to be probably not guaranteed, but you can see how he got here. So Reeves continues then saying, the idea for me that why I kept that scene in the movie, even though I cut the first scene that I'm describing, is because it was important for me at the end. I actually took the scene that's in the movie still out for a brief time. So he's on about the one with the Riddler at the end there. He actually took that out, but he tested it and we tested it. And I realized that for me, on the one hand, it finishes the Riddler's arc because the way his story plays out and you see him in the wake of what's happened and how Batman has been able to sort of thwart what he was doing, which is why Riddler was really frustrated in that Arkham cell because he saw on the TV that Batman was on top of the garden helping people out and Vigilante saves all these people. That is the most annoying thing the Riddler could probably have wanted out of his outcome. He did all of this stuff, he arguably did make a bit of a name for himself, but his grand finale was completely swooped up from under him. And if anything, it made more of a name for Batman. But this is where Reeves then says, but it was also this idea in this moment, now that the stranglehold of Falcone, or Falcone, whatever your preference there, because it was said both different ways in the film, Falcone has been broken, it means that there is a moment of not only hope, but it's also the moment of greatest danger in the city in a long time, because it means that everyone is going to grab for power. And when Selina is talking to Batman at the end of the movie, and they're having their kind of very poignant goodbye because they're always going to be on the opposite side of things, she says to him, this place isn't going to change. And when I took the scene out, the stakes of the scene changed because that scene, the one at the end with the Riddler and Joker, shows you that when she says that, you've just seen it, and you see the two of them next to each other, and that's just one sort of example of how trouble in Gotham is never going to subside. there's always going to be somebody with a plan afoot, and so it changed the movie dramatically. Which is true. Like, I really like that. He tried maybe even taking it out, even after taking the first scene out, but it kind of, even though you could get that, it's going to get harder for you, you know, it's going to get worse for you, as Selina said. Adding that scene right before that of Riddler and Joker, it does kind of show you that the kettle is still boiling. Like, there is trouble still brewing in Gotham. And when you remove that, it doesn't reinforce Selina's comment as much as it does as when you just seen, like, freaking Barry laughing. And it's like, Gotham loves a comeback story, right? So I completely really like how Reeves really did methodically look at that in that way. But he does say, so the scene is not meant to be there to say, like, oh, here's an Easter egg. The next movie is X. Like, I don't know that the Joker would be in the next movie, but I can tell you that here's what you're seeing is an early days version of this character, and trouble, as always, is brewing in Gotham. And I love that. I love it. I love it. But we've got more. We've got loads more. We've got loads more. So before we get into the breakdown of the actual scene that he did cut out, and the reason why he did that, long story short, is because he didn't really feel like it was necessary. And true, like with what we saw, we still saw Batman deduce and go along cracking who the Riddler was, who the winged rat was, and stuff like that. And if anything, maybe he did feel like it would maybe, not that he said this, I don't think, but as some fans said, having that 30-second scene at the end is fair enough. You know, it doesn't even say next villain's going to be Joker, but it wasn't stealing the thunder. Not that I think this original scene with Batman getting the Joker's help to profile the Riddler would have stolen the thunder, but it still would have maybe taken some focus off the Riddler by having a very Hannibal Lecter-like consultation with the Batman, and everyone being like, oh my god, that is the Joker. So I understand why he did that. We're probably going to get it as a bonus scene. Whether he releases that on YouTube, or maybe when it goes to HBO Max in the bonus section, sometimes they have little bonus clips. We're going to have to wait and see. Could just be saved for the Blu-ray release, who knows? But I hope he releases it on YouTube so everyone can just have really easy access to that. Now, I know I keep teasing it, but there's still some more in-between stuff before we get onto the actual scene description of where we all got to be like, holy crap, especially with the dialogue. It's like, Reeves even addresses keeping the scene secret with Barry, and, you know, even, it's funny because I feel like this speaks to me, and I just feel like, I'm sorry, Matt. You know, we cover your film. There's certain things that I definitely wouldn't give away because there's things that I knew that I didn't give away. But when there's also public stuff floating around, I'm gotta cover it, you know? So, here he says, you know when you're making a movie like this, you want it to be different. You want people to feel like they're having a special experience, and then for me, when you're going to the cinema, you want some level of surprise. And I think one of the things I was worried about was a speculation while we were making the movie that we would be exploring the character that we ended up exploring. So we started thinking, well, what can we do to throw people off the scent? So this idea of making him Stanley Merkel was exactly that, because the police force is actually a big part of the story, so it seemed credible that we could be doing that. So that was the goal. And that's what I was saying the whole time. Like, I'm really not trying to blow smoke on my ass, but I was telling you, just because the IMDb or whatever people were going for said Stanley Merkel, doesn't mean that wasn't a cover role for a larger role. That is such a very typical thing to do that I saw right through that. Right, so Variety got a scene description of the cameo, and this is why I was especially happy that I didn't make a video just on the IGN comments, but big shout out to IGN for getting that scoop on just that detail that Matt gave that. But Variety here, oh my god, they got something else. So let's read this gorgeous comment out. So, in the early cut of the Batman, Keoghan actually showed up much earlier, in a scene following the revelation that the Riddler has killed the Gotham City Police Commissioner. I actually thought, like when I was watching it the third time, by the way, last night, I was thinking, it was specifically right after that moment, I think, you know when Batman presses the little litter tray from the little freaking rat kind of thing, and it like has to the Batman card in there just after they saw Pete Savage's body. It said to the Batman, and Batman in this moment, again, another letter, he was looking angry. It was like, he was like quenching his lips, they were quivering, and I was thinking maybe this is the exact placement going in what I knew now of when around about the time this scene was, he would then go to Arkham after getting yet another letter to go and see the Joker to help profile this serial killer. But carrying on, as it says here, Batman finds himself unnerved over what to make of what the Riddler is doing. So Reeves says, I thought he would be really insecure about this, and he'd probably want to find some way to get into the Riddler's mindset, like in Manhunter or Mindhunter. This idea of profiling somebody so you can predict his next move. So Reeves shot a scene in which Batman snuck inside Arkham, arriving at the door of a specific inmate. Reeves continues, and this guy says, it's almost our anniversary, isn't it? You realize that they have a relationship and that this guy obviously did something and Batman somehow got him into Arkham. So again, he's being kind of coy with exactly how he got in there, but I love that Barry's Joker says it's almost our anniversary, isn't it? As in, it wasn't like beyond 2 years ago, because Batman's been doing this for 2 years. So it's probably almost their first anniversary. And that is such a Joker thing to say, because he has this very playful, almost weirdly romanticized relationship with the Batman. Even though he's not the Joker yet, he still, as what I've said with all the other yet-to-be named monikers of Catwoman and Penguin, has every characteristic of that character. So he is put away by Batman. And he probably was frustrated by that, but was also like, oh, I'm excited to interact with him again. So when he comes to see, you're seeing me? Oh, I feel so special. It's almost our anniversary, isn't it? So considering that Batman, as Reeves has actually specifically said, it's in year 2, but year 2 is still 1 year, 6 months in. So he put Barry's Joker away around somewhere in the first year. Whether that was 4 months in, 8 months in, who knows? But what we do know is that the GCPD series that could pertain to Arkham, as we're about to dive into, is also set during Batman Year 1. Now, that makes things very interesting for what could be explored. Even if Barry's character isn't the focal point, it could somewhat serve as a little dish for as to how this masked vigilante, who had only been around, like, fairly new at the time of this GCPD series, as articulated by Reeves himself at the first DC Fandom, you know, it just makes sense to me that we'll get some major clues as to how Batman put him away, even if it's just rough references. That it's like, hey, did you hear that masked vigilante put away that crazy smiling guy? I don't know, but it could be explored. But we also do know that it has roots to the Arkham within this Batman world, which just makes this theory ever more fascinating. And how you look at the Drops logo, maybe Joker was doing something like that. Again, he was not exactly the clown prince of crime. One day you're on top, as he says, and then the next day you're a clown. Maybe he was looking at himself when he was saying to that with the Riddler. He was once at the top with the Drops, but now he's just in Arkham as a clown, so to speak. So again, enough of me rambling, and let's continue this scene description. As they talk, Batman tells Joker he wants to know how the Riddler thinks. Joker's reply, as relayed by Reeves, "What do you mean? You want to know how he thinks? You guys think the same." I love this dialogue. Like, I got chills because, again, even though this is Barry's Joker, he's a bit more of a younger Joker. As I went into my ending explained video, I don't think, even though, ironically enough, he's older as 29 years old Barry than Heath Ledger was. Heath Ledger comes across more as like a 30s-esque, mid-30s Joker, whereas I feel like this is a bit more of a kid-esque Joker, early 20s, to be that of something more Jerome-y from Gotham. Not as young as Jerome, but you get the vibe I'm going for. Yet, he's still brilliant and has a brilliant mind, even though it's completely chaotic, anarchic, and crazy. And he has a very nihilistic view that we've been over before, with a very dark reaction to his congenital disease. Doesn't mean, just like Hannibal Lecter, that he isn't bloody intelligent, and that he could be used as a consultant on some cases as to what, like Batman, the world's greatest detective, even though he is still a Batman who's becoming at this part in the story, went to this character. He thought I could utilize this character. That's fascinating to me. But also speaks to that of the very intelligent character that the Joker is at the same time. This is why, yeah, sure, he might not be able to like punch up Batman, even though sometimes they do have an exchange and he might pull out a blade. He still has a lot of brains, like almost like that of the Riddler in a sense. But of course, also the unpredictability as well. But also, I love how Joker advises him, you know, what do you mean? You wanna know how he thinks? You guys think the same. This is not only just advice, but it's that intelligence we're speaking of, because as Matt Reeves says here, Reeves smiles. What he's really doing is getting into Batman's head, he says, and Batman is resisting this idea violently. And so That's what that scene was. It was a scene to unsettle him. Ultimately, however, Reeves felt that the scene hit the same beat accomplished elsewhere in the movie, so he cut it. It wasn't necessary, he says. It was one of those scenes where, given how complex the narrative was, by taking it out, it kept the story moving in a way it needed to. So I love that. It's funny because maybe, Joker was definitely on something there, and Batman so violently and urgently wanted to resist the idea of, like, what do you mean we think the same? But that does speak to how Edward, the whole vengeance comparisons, the parallels between that, but Batman's almost so alienated by that in that interrogation scene. It's like, we're not a team. You're just a psychopath. You die in here, nobody. All of that stuff. It's kind of regurgitating it in a different thematic, resonant kind of weird way that was articulated in that interrogation scene with the Riddler. For Joker to just say that earlier in the movie by quite literally saying, what do you mean? You want to know how he thinks? You guys think the same. He knew. Maybe you should just maybe think a bit more inner on yourself and that of what the Riddler could be mimicking with you, even though it hadn't fully dawned on Batman yet, because it really does with Edward's confession. Here, Joker knew that would get into Batman's head. He wanted to unsettle Batman. He gets a kick out of that. I bet when Batman maybe in this scene is just like, no, you're wrong. Joker is just like laughing or just like, really just enjoying egging him on. And Batman probably gets up, walks out as they maybe wheel, like in the Arkham Asylum game, as they're just wheeling Joker in, strapped up to something. They're probably then taking him out as Batman storms off. But Joker, in my mind, with maybe having the mouth covered, is just like, yeah, man. Like, I mean, I gave you a bit of advice, but also I articulated it in such a way that was meant to like rile you up. And seeing that reaction in Batman, I bet he lapped that shit up. Literally. No, okay, maybe not literally, but you know what I mean. Now, specifically with regards to how we could get some expansion on Barry's character, even though I do believe that, as Reeves says himself, he's got a lot of ideas, but, he went to Barry and he said, look, I don't know where this is going, what it's going, if it's even gonna go, but Barry was still very up for it. Despite his ideas, it doesn't guarantee anything, but maybe he's gonna think with all of these series in active development, maybe anything's on the table, and he could, as we know, since these are in-universe shows, and one of them is going to pertain to Arkham, as with the quote we are about to read out, you'd have to think that maybe Barry would, especially knowing, well, I don't know him personally, but Barry's a big fan of this stuff. He probably loves the idea that he's got this role. Would be more than game, just like how we might see some of the larger actors as well make appearances in these shows as well. So Reeves says that we're doing this Penguin series, and one of the great things about that is Colin Farrell, he's like you've never seen him. He's so incredible, and he's a scene stealer. Along the way, we thought maybe we could do his character as a series, so I talked to HBO Max and showed them Colin in the movie and spoke to them about what this could be, and they said, let's do it, but this is where he comments about the other thing. So we're doing that, and we're doing another series that connects to Arkham. Now, sure, things could have changed, and there are other articles saying, well, to be fair, is this a new series? Because that clarification hasn't been fully definitively said. However, what we do know is that the other series and the first series that was announced was the GCPD series. So if I'm putting two and two together here, he says that in addition to that Penguin series, so we're doing that and we're doing another series. Well, it could still be that GCPD series, just as with what he's saying here, that connects to Arkham. And continuing on, we are talking and thinking about the next movie, but to be honest with you, at the moment, I really want the audience to connect with this, and I really believe they will, because I think Rob is an incredible Batman. But then, there is another quote, so he says, there might be places, Reeves says. There's stuff I'm very interested in doing in an Arkham space, potentially for HBO Max. There are things we've talked about there, so it's very possible. It also isn't impossible that there is some story that comes back where Joker comes into our world. What I feel like what he's saying there could be connected to what was originally, or still could be predominantly, yet with new innovative and expanded upon ideas as time has unfolded in Arkham space, yet also GCPD series, in where it's still a GCPD series, but amongst that cop who's fighting for his soul as the original premise, the case of that series will connect to Arkham maybe, and how Matt Reeves says, so in how it's very possible, and it also isn't impossible, that there is some story that comes back where the Joker comes into our world. Well, since we know Batman was involved, and originally the GCPD series, and could still be the case, we need this clarification, to be honest, was set during Batman Year One, and for now is, and how we know that it's almost our anniversary, as Barry's Joker says. Well, a year ago, that would match up to one of these HBO Max spin-off series, and I do feel for now that we should assume that it's still the GCPD series, but it's within somewhat of an Arkham space. It could be GCPD series, Penguin series, and there's stuff I'm interested in doing in the Arkham space, potentially for HBO Max. So that word potentially for HBO Max is interesting to me, because that's just like, okay, so he's not sure now? Like, it's not definitive anyway, potentially for HBO Max. We know that the writer, I believe, fell off for the GCPD series, but I can't remember if I'm wrong or right here, if they did pick up another one. But either way, it's not definitively clear with regards to what's going on there. But I do feel as though, just for bottom line talk here, that a GCPD series could be still following the case of the drops. Batman gets involved. Somehow Barry's, you know, smiling, congenital, diseased guy who's maybe a part of this almost Red Hood-like homage gang pushing these drops, gets put in Arkham. But also he did something in where he's also a killer. So maybe it's got nothing to do with the drops, and it has everything to do with being a serial killer, like what the Riddler was. But maybe a bit more chaotic. Or maybe it is combining drops, but a guy who is handling the drops business, but killing people. I don't know. That's why I cannot settle on that drops theory, because I see in how it has absolutely nothing to do with it, but also in how, yeah, sure, they could push it in there as well, especially with the logo having that kind of Red Hoodie-esque design with a bit of a, you know, disfigured smile. It can remind you of an early animated series-esque kind of Scarecrow hood, but it can also look like that of a Gotham's, Reeves' Batverse version of his take on it. Doesn't have to be Red Hood Gang, or technically pertains to nothing of the Red Hood Gang other than an imagery of when maybe Barry's John Doe had something to do with this Drops Enterprise. They just went round with that logo, and maybe the gang or whatever he was leading at the time or had anything to do with had that kind of disguise. I could be completely wrong with that. That's where I don't want to speculate too much, because the rabbit holes are endless there without further clarification. But it's very interesting with that last line. It also isn't impossible that there is some story that comes back where Joker comes into our world. As to what he really specifically means with that, could mean, well, technically he hasn't got the title yet or declared himself, as Reeves says, as the Joker, so maybe that's a story where he comes into our world in one of the future movies, maybe the third movie, maybe not the second movie. Or that could be pertaining to what he means is, just for the sake of just calling him Joker, he means that in the prequel series, we see how he somewhat comes into this world and gets apprehended and put into Arkham. But I think I'm going to end the video there, guys. I just wanted to do a big information dump with some of my breakdown thoughts, some of my theories and speculation as to where that can go, but more clarification is somewhat needed, despite the immense amount of clarification we got about design and actual dialogue from the scene to a very T. All we have yet to see now is how it exactly plays out when we see the scene released by Matt Reeves in the near future, I assume. And I'm sure there's gonna be extra bits and bobs of dialogue, and, you know, like maybe Joker laughing as to how he's getting in Batman's head, and Batman's, you know, frustration and refusing to believe this advice that he just got from this killer. But the dynamic, I can't wait to see, and more. So I would love to know your thoughts on this, guys. Do consider subscribing to the channel if you're brand new here. A lot of new people have arrived on the channel and subscribed, so I want to say thank you to anyone who's made it this far. I will be keeping up updates on all of these series, any information, and, you know, theory videos and everything like that going into the Batman sequel, but everything else. This is the place for that, and other types of videos here. We cover quite a lot on this channel, so maybe consider subscribing today. And if you made it this far, I'd really appreciate a like. If you also got this far, put down in the comments below with whatever comment you're going to put anyway, hashtag our anniversary, because that lets me know that you're one of the real ones who made it this far. I mean, sure, one of you may have skipped to this part of the video, but I'd like to think that you're not disingenuous and would put that anyway. But anyway, guys, I'm going to shut up now. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, links as always in the description. But thank you so much for watching. This is just the beginning, despite the movie's out. We're back to square one now with updates. So yeah, this is going to be a wild ride for the next few years. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, Bat family, in the next video. Goodbye.